Dug up something creepy while treasure hunting?
It's right underneath those tree Welcome to Diggin with Deej. Hi, everybody. How's everybody doing tonight? Thank you very much for coming to my live stream. I appreciate that. Let me quick go through who we got in the chat. I believe Linda Wallace was the first one in today. Some of the others commented earlier. Cynthia Swearinger, Monk Cheetah, Nancy. Hi, Nancy. Ambient Girl Digs. Let's see, who else? Let me scroll down. Backyard Treasures, Kayla. Welcome. David Carlisle's in the chat. Welcome. Kay's digging it. Welcome. Javier Garcia. Welcome back. Lincoln Central Coins. Welcome. Let's see, who else do I have here? Damon Jacobs, who's one of our guests. Let's see, do I see anybody else? I'm trying to catch up here. Vida, welcome. Let's see. Almost to the bottom, I think. Mud Swat, welcome. And Clark's Cove Detecting, welcome, Rob and Melissa. So tonight's guests are from Adirondack Park Paranormal Society and A.P.P.S. Relic Seekers. It's Damon and Sue, and let me add them to the stream. There's Damon, there's Sue. Hi, how are you?
Hello.
Very good. You're good. And tonight, oh, there's Paul. Welcome, American Woodland Wallix. We are going to discuss that creepy jar that I found a year ago this last spring. And that. Hi, Linda Wallace. Hi, Mark Thomas. And I'm going to start by giving you guys a list of all the different thoughts of everybody, because we had many, many comments on that video. The suggestions of what viewers thought that it was start out something to do with a law enforcement officer. A mourning jar, somebody burying it to evoke healing. Spell casting, a traveling serial killer. Creepy scrapbook of death, jarred and buried. A sick person savoring tragedies. Someone with an unnatural fascination with death. A serial killer in the making. A witch's jar or witching jar, something to do with paganism. Symptom of OCD is a fascination with death. Someone with a warped mind. Family member may have found it after a guy or gal passed and buried it, thinking that it, would never be found again. Others said it was beyond bizarre. Others suggested I sell it on eBay. Others suggested that I frame the clippings. Someone thought it was someone fascinated with unsolved mysteries. And someone called it a time capsule of sorts. So those were all the suggestions. I put it back. After the live stream, I'll put links to both videos of when I found it and when I put it back. But I put it back because I had something really strange happen to me. So what did you think of the video, Sue and Damon, when you watched it?
My first reaction was once you opened the jar and saw what was in there, that was my first reaction, was to put it back.
Yeah.
Yes, it's morbid, to use your words. It's a bit odd, but if it's buried that deep, it was probably meant to be buried that deep.
To stay buried that deep.
Yeah. That was my first reaction.
Right.
About what was the depth on that, Deej, out of curiosity?
I would guess about 1.5 feet.
And that was after you pulling the duff back and all that stuff?
Well, what happened was I was there. It was winter time, but we had like a balmy mid 40s day. So I took my rock hammer to see if I could bust through the frost layer to get to it, to somewhere. Well, the only place that I found soft ground was under the roots of that tree. So then I started digging in there, and I would guesstimate there was a hole, like a cavern underneath there, that the dirt didn't go all the way down, maybe because of the roots. I don't know. And I made sure there was no critters in there first. But I saw something shiny in there, big and shiny, but I couldn't tell what it was. And pulled a few things out and then pulled that out. And so I'm guessing there was not 1.5 feet of dirt on top of it. There was probably 8 to 10 inches of dirt on top of it because it was hollowed out inside there. It was weird. Hi, Marlon. Welcome.
My first initial reaction when I watched it the very first time was it was very reminiscent of, like, I think somebody said something about a serial keeper or serial killer's trophies, so to speak.
Right.
I had visions of the original CSI series going through my head at one point. You know, there was it was vaguely reminiscent of something you might have actually seen on the Blair Witch Project movie, to an extent. Just instead of it being, you know, body parts, it was.
I've heard of the Blair Witch Project, but I don't know much about it.
So it was a interesting horror movie. We'll go with that.
Right.
But it's tough to say what it could be without knowing more of a backstory, I guess.
Right.
And I from what we've been talking, you had said that none of those clippings correlate with the other.
Right. I
So
can't find any connection between the people that are in these clippings. Now,
so my thought would be more of either it's somebody who's got a fascination with death or morbidity, or somebody suggested a witch's jar. And it's somebody who's
all that was in it was clippings, though. I thought witch's jars had multiple items in them.
So there's different schools of thought, and a friend of mine, her school of thought leans more towards, because I talked to a few people about this, and their school of thought was they were just trying to bury the negativity. That's why I was kind of asking what the depth was, you know.
Right.
I mean, we could go into, you know, finer details, like, okay, what side of the property was it on? What if it was on a specific corner of the property?
No.
No,
was where it was located. Okay. My home site of tragedy permission. The owners of that were the ones that told me that in the very early 1900s, like 1910 up to 1910, somewhere between 1900 and 1910, the three farms that all fit up, they all touch each other's lands. Their borders are all, they were having trouble with flooding. So the three farms worked on a drainage ditch.
Okay.
That went along the borders of their property. And this is at almost to the end of it. Okay.
So it's not per se, it's not like all three corners of the property intersect on that cellar hole.
No.
Okay.
No.
All right.
So it's not a cellar hole. It's just a dump on the side of this drainage ditch that they dug out.
Gotcha. Okay.
And the drainage ditch is probably 20 feet deep. So it's on, let's see, what side of the bank would that be considered? It's in a bend in the creek, or not creek, but the drain. So when I was facing that hole under the tree, it would have been facing west. And if I would have looked to my right, that would have been north. So I also double checked to see if, because the genealogies for these 3 families that own these farms is at the Historical Society. And I double checked to see if any of the names in the articles correlated with any of the people that we knew of in the families, and there were no matches. So I don't know. I haven't figured it out.
I mean, even you have even the remote possibility that because it was such a large dump site and the 3 families
Yeah,
were
maybe
using
somebody
it.
else would start
I was
putting
going to
their
say
stuff
it's
in
very
there.
possible somebody said, "Look, I'm looking for a place to get rid of all this stuff.
Mhm.
Oh, come on over, use our place."
Yeah,
And that wouldn't be beyond them.
yeah.
So if you decide to continue to research this site,
Mhm.
you look at your census records and
Mhm.
see who was there during that time and kind of stretch it out in maybe a 5-10 mile radius,
Mhm.
depending on how big your farms are,
Right.
and see if there's other families that might correlate with that. But
Right.
that would require a much deeper search.
Oh yeah, for sure. Welcome, Tyson. Terry, welcome. And I thought I saw Thin Blue Diggers in here too. Welcome. Now the mason jar itself, when I researched that, it's a Dre Perfect Mason. Now the company that made the Dre Perfect Mason, or made the Dre mason jars, they only made mason jars from the late 1800s to 1924, because in 1925 Ball bought them. Okay. And because Ball bought them, nobody really has any exact dates, but what I could find, they are guessing that the Dre Perfect Mason was made in the early 1900s.
There's your date.
Yeah.
Within 10, 20 years, there's your date.
Right. So the articles all seem to be from the month of July, or most of them. But some, I was told, some people found these articles, some were dated 1909, some were dated 1906, and I think one was from 1907.
They were all from the month of July?
Nancy, isn't that what you said? Many of them were from the month of July for some reason.
That's interesting.
Yeah. So, what else do I have?
Was there? Why do I feel like I get this vibe of like traveling circus or traveling like entertainment coming to town each year at the same time?
Oh, we
kind of
had
deal.
one of those. We had a traveling circus that came to town.
Like your something wicked this way comes type of situation.
Mm-hmm.
This is what I'm thinking. Were they yeah, that's exactly what I'm thinking. Travelers, either travelers did they come around that time of year?
Right.
And so that's when they collected the newspapers because they were stationed there.
Right. Now, I've been having a hard time finding out who the mortician was. The what's another name for him?
Undertaker?
Undertaker was in that time frame. Because that was another suggestion. I think somebody said, what if it's, an undertaker that just clipped out the articles saying I took care of this family member or whatever. Welcome, Marcy. And that.
And the article, they're not all from the same town though, correct?
No, they're from all over the United States. But what's weird, what's making me think that, nowadays newspapers buy to use articles from a company called the Associated Press.
Mm-hmm.
And in the early 1900s, from what I can tell, they had something similar to that as well.
Yeah, they did. The newspapers I found in the house I'm living in now, they had a Saturday paper that would come out.
Mm-hmm.
And that Saturday paper had events from all over either the States or all over the world.
Okay.
And they would show up in other newspapers, but it was from this general area. And then
Right.
they would have a few articles from other parts of the states, but it was primarily from New York State.
Yeah.
But it was the same situation where that particular article could be found in other newspapers.
Right. Because I had several people tell me they found the same article in an online newspaper. You know, they were searching online because I had several people that volunteered to help me try to find these articles and what areas they were from. Some found the same article in New York and Kentucky, and I think one person found it in an Ohio paper too.
Yes.
So
that goes back to what I was just referring to.
Right. Welcome, PA Relic Hunters. So when I first found it, I thought it was really strange. I did put it in my car, which I haven't had any problems with my car. But when I got home, I knew better than to take it inside. It's a creepy thing that I found. It's creepy. I mean, why would anybody save articles like that? That's just... So I brought a towel out. I brought some channel locks out to try to get it open on the deck. And I probably shouldn't have touched it with my hands, but I did when I opened it up. But I did not bring it in the house. I stored it in the decks until I returned it and buried it. But I dug this up just prior to COVID, just prior to, I'm trying to think. I think I just gotten back from Florida. We had a minor heat wave and I went out digging. 2 weeks later, after I found this thing, I got the most god-awful hemorrhaging nosebleed. I have never had a nosebleed before in my life. And it was so bad, it was scaring my boyfriend. It was literally shooting out of me like a faucet, just out of the blue. And it took 3 tries to emergency to get it to stop. And I just thought that was really odd. I've never had I mean, I've had like the minor nosebleed. You blow your nose and there's a teeny bit of blood there, but that's it.
Yep.
But that was when I was a kid, you know. Never had any. I mean, this was scary. It was scaring the people in emergency even. It was scary. It was like something out of some horror flick.
That's the best kind.
I mean, we came home the first time, came home from emergency, and my kitchen floor was covered in blood.
Oh, wow.
That's how much. I mean, I lost so much blood that the doctors ran blood tests to find out how much blood I had lost. They were that concerned. So now, normally, I mean, I don't know what you call it, but I call it intuition. Normally, for instance, in the past, I have, like when my grandmother passed, the phone rang. It wasn't Friday night like it normally is when Grandma called every Friday to talk to my mom. It was an oddball night. It was like 9 o'clock at night. I didn't even answer the phone. And I said, somebody's calling about Grandma, Mom. And she just looked at me really weird. And she picked up the phone and it was the police. I've had weird feelings like on my way home from work or something. And this still happens to me. I'll get a really weird, bad feeling inside, and I purposely drive home a different way. And then I'll hear there was an accident. Yeah, so intuitions like that, I don't think I have any abilities or anything like that. Hi, Fun with Dirt. Welcome. Hi, Bill, Papa Roos.
You could look at it as a sixth sense.
Yeah, sixth sense sort of thing. You know, I thought the jar was creepy, but I really didn't get any negativity off of it. I tried to get a hold of my friend Randy to see if he would come and check it out. And that's, you know, at that point, COVID had already hit. So then, you know, everybody's joking around because I found that creepy jar. I must have caused the COVID.
Got it. Blame
So
Deej. All righty.
blame Deej.
Nice.
Hi,
Turned the whole
Marty.
world upside down.
So, but you know, I knew enough. I didn't get a negative feeling from it, but I got enough of a feeling that I knew I wasn't taking it in my house. And I put it in the shed, and it didn't seem to matter. I still had that strange emergency room visit.
Yeah. So if there was anything negative attached to it, anyways, you touched it. So
I touched it, right? Even though I had gloves on one hand, I touched it with the other hand.
So my next question is: you said there was other things that were buried with it, on I'm assuming above the mason jar.
It was just shards of china and stuff,
Shards
and
of china,
broken shards of glass, and that pieces of plastic.
And there was nothing below it except for a void in the dirt.
It was in the same hole with it, but it was like a tunnel underneath there.
Huh.
So, welcome, country diggers.
Yeah, burning it probably wouldn't be a good idea.
No,
especially if it's been blessed or anything like that, or the reason it's down there. There's a reason it was buried in the first place, and I'm thinking burning it would probably not be a good idea.
No.
You know.
I mean, I don't know if the spirits of all those poor people is somehow connected to it, and I wasn't about to do that.
Yeah, you know, it's odd that you guys figured it was what, a 5-year span of clippings, roughly.
1906 to 1909.
Okay, so 3 or 4 year span.
Yeah.
All from the same major publisher. I mean, without knowing who actually put the thing in the ground, I mean, there's probably a connection somewhere.
Right. It's just not an obvious one.
Yeah, I agree with Team Clambake. Holy water, sage it, and rebury it, which I know you've reburied it already.
I reburied it, and I said a prayer over it when I reburied it.
Yeah.
But I did not do sage. And I did. Here, you told me to do sage at my house, and I didn't do sage.
Yeah, I seem to remember possibly putting that in the comments, like literally after I watched the video the first time.
Yeah.
But no, and I'm sure it was probably just in jest when you said burn it, country diggers, but
not always.
Yeah, you don't want to burn it if it's got an evil feeling. I hate to reference, you know, a Disney movie, but let's think about Hocus Pocus here. We don't want to burn the black candle.
Yeah.
So
don't need to stir up the pot.
We don't need to stir the pot, and that's triggering whatever evil or whatever might be attached to it in the first place.
Yeah. Right.
We try to stay away from flame, don't we, Sue?
Now, I have a question. Can I grow the sage myself?
Yes.
That's the best way, honestly.
Okay. Is it?
Yeah, because now you know you technically will have a connection to it.
Yeah.
Right.
And you know what soil you're using, you know where it's coming from. So yeah, that's actually the best way to do it.
Okay. Yep. Welcome, Scott, Diggers UK. We have somebody from the UK. Sweet. Welcome. So, because I want to still dig in that dump, but I'm not digging over there where I found that thing. That's off limits now. Do you recommend that I don't, or should I just sage the area before I dig?
I would say a sort of you know, a little bit of a protection prayer, or just a prayer of blessing over the area before you start digging. You know, same as like we were talking about in the last episode, you know, hey, I mean goodwill. I'm not here to, you know, the same type of you know,
like I don't mean any
cadence
harm.
you would use. Exactly. Yeah. Use that cadence.
Tell your story.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You know, and if you do find something like that again,
yeah, if I find another one like that,
Granted, you're not always
I'm done
equipped
with
to
that
handle
dump.
it
I'm
there
not
on
going
site,
back.
but
I'm not
well,
going back. I'll find a new
there's
dump.
that too. Granted, you're not really equipped to crack it open on site like you are at home, but it's safer to explore it there on site where it's still
but
kind of connected to the
I'm
land.
kind of afraid to even open one if I ever find another one.
And there was nothing else in that jar except for the clippings
Just clippings and some fuzz.
and some spider webs.
And I put everything back in it,
I was going to ask you if you would put the fuzz
including
back
the fuzz. Yep. Everything back in it, put the lid on it, and stuck it in my shed, which is not even attached to my house or my deck.
I would sage your shed too. I would sage your shed too.
Okay. All right.
Just to play it safe.
Right.
Better to be
And again,
overcautious than under.
a prayer of blessing over the area too would be not a bad idea as well.
Right.
I mean, I've watched that video a couple times. I've looked at a couple of the clippings and done a little digging on it myself, and I'm perplexed on the link. Other than I kind of agree, not 100% with a couple of the theories, but partially with a couple of theories of witch's jar, obsession with morbidity. Somebody who has an obsession with death.
Right.
We one of the teams we work with, they got a member that's wholly obsessed with death. We got a member on our team that happens to be obsessed with a little bit with death in a sense. It happens. People are like that. It's not a bad thing. It's hard to tell, especially with the age, and if there's no continuation of the story from when it was buried. It's not like, hey, I buried this jar 25 years ago, don't touch it, and the story travels through the families. If that hasn't happened, it's hard to really pin down a really solid connection, other than, like Sue said, is going back through the census archives when you can, expanding your radius, and then going off that
I
time
didn't
frame.
expand my radius, but I did use census records.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the things we tell our research crew all the time. A couple members on our research team is, when in doubt, expand your radius a couple extra miles to see if there might be a link in the chain somewhere, because and very well, we've had this discussion before, talking about the old historic aerial maps and stuff like that. Property now, even properties 100 years ago, were not the same as what the properties were 200 years ago.
Right.
So things get dissected a lot. There's a property we're looking at right now, which, you go back to the 1908 map. It covers, several square miles. You go back to the 1874 map or whatever it was, and then it's covering almost 20 miles. So, you gotta try just kind of expanding your range a little bit and seeing where it might take you, I guess.
What is scrying? See Marcy's comment? What is that?
So scrying is using Sue could probably explain it better than I can. That's using a pendulum. It's not a Ouija board, but it's the same type of concept of.
We're not doing that.
It's the good part of it. It's not the negative dark stuff.
Yeah. Some people have the ability. They can actually they can connect from the map, and I'm thinking about using a map to the pendulum. The pendulum having something on the bottom of it, like a stone, something that person is connected with. And that will literally, I have seen this happen. The chain will literally move in the direction of the questions that you're asking.
Yeah.
So if I put a map down and said, the jar, who did the jar belong to? It could go to whatever.
Yeah. If it was connected to somebody close to that area.
You don't want the chain. You want to hold it really nice and still when it's going to do the work for you. It's similar to scrying is also known as divining, or
Okay.
I was gonna say, you know how they do the witching sticks
or
right
the
behind the
the,
water?
the dowsing
Yep.
rods,
Well, that's
that
I
kind of
had
thing.
somebody witch my
Yeah.
well.
There's
40
there's
years
things
ago.
called scrying mats, which it looks kind of similar to. It's got the letters of the alphabet. We actually did it at an investigation. It's
Mhm.
not the Ouija board in the
Right.
dark sense. It's more of a. It's you ask questions and it gives you answers that, like Marcy was just saying, you ask questions, it gives you answers, or it'll spell out things. But it's
Mhm.
not calling upon the dark and the evil and all that stuff. It's
Right.
using
Yeah. You're talking to
white
whatever's
magic.
there.
Yeah, you're
Mhm.
talking to the spirits that are attached.
Right. Because that's the only thing. I haven't gone back to that dump.
Yeah, I mean,
I did.
again, you're gonna want to.
I went back when I buried it and said the prayer, and then
Yep.
I went back one more time. I didn't have any bad experience or anything, but I haven't dug there since last year.
And again, like we talked about in the last episode too, have some sort of a
Mhm.
talisman with you, a crucifix, or Saint Christopher medal, or
Right.
something like that, so you
Yeah,
can,
say
you've got a little protection with you as well.
Right.
it
Right.
doesn't hurt to, and it doesn't have to be Christian based. Whatever you
Yeah.
feel strongest of,
Right.
have a prayer that gives you that that protection, that mental
Mhm.
protection.
Right.
And a lot of times that's all you need, and when you go in, but you still go in with respect and all that fun stuff.
Right.
Yep.
But yeah, start out with a prayer of protection and then go from there.
Okay. Okay.
And believe it or not, Google is a great tool for finding just a very basic, generic.
Yeah.
Oh, I could just say the Lord's Prayer.
Yeah,
that works too.
Yeah.
Yep.
That works.
You could
That's
say
why
the Lord's
that's
Prayer.
why I said whatever you feel closest to is
Right.
going to have the most strength for you.
Right.
Yep.
So yeah.
Right. Yeah, because that's why I've been, it's been good weather, but I've been afraid to go back there.
You got to go
I
back.
don't own a crucifix,
Yeah,
so I'm gonna
you
have
definitely
to get
gotta
one.
you gotta get some closure somehow on that.
Yeah. But I
in a
definitely need
sense.
to get some sage and burn it because it's too early to grow sage up here in Michigan right now. I'm not sure where I would get that.
You can get seeds or
Well, I can
yeah.
get seeds, but where can I get sage that's already dried? Or do you not want to do that where you don't know where it came from?
So any type of
if you have a reputable person that you normally get stuff from,
yeah.
as far as
Is there
plants and
any
stuff.
that, or do you have any holistic medicine
Yeah, they're
type
in
shops
probably a half hour from here. There's a
Perfect.
or a Native American shop,
there's like
as cliche as
an
it sounds?
organic. They use other things they use plants to heal.
Yep, there you go.
That's what
They're
I
going to
want.
have sage sticks. I can almost guarantee you they'll have sage sticks there.
Okay.
Yep.
Because
mud spot's not too far off. You find your local head shop, and I can
Right.
guarantee you they're going to have sage sticks there
Because when
as
I
well.
went through my change, the doctors kept wanting to give me these hormones and stuff, and they were making me sick. So I went there, and they gave me something that took care of the
Yeah.
problem, and it wasn't medicine.
Yeah.
I mean, so
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
if you know anybody who does it's called Reiki or therapeutic touch, which is more of holistic healing. It's
Mhm.
not hands-on massage therapy.
Right.
I will guarantee you they either have a supply or they can
Mhm.
tell you where to go to get some of sage,
Right.
because they use sage a lot with Reiki and with therapeutic touch.
So every time I go to that dump, should I burn sage or just the one time?
It depends on,
Depends if-
honestly. Yeah,
I
it
was gonna-
depends on how active it is, and if it gets active even after you sage the first time, then yeah, I would probably sage again, depending on what you find.
Right.
Definitely sage what you find.
Right.
Yes.
Just to give it some peace.
Mhm.
Ambient, as much as the online circuit is fantastic, I question getting sage from an online store because you don't actually know what you're getting when you get it.
Right.
Sometimes,
Which is why I said if you have a reputable source.
as much as I love going to Amazon to get Reiki stones and stuff like that, sometimes they're man-made and it doesn't exactly work the way it's supposed to.
Right.
So
Right.
Yeah.
I'm just seeing if I missed anything in the comments. If I missed you in the comments, just put it in capital letters and I'll hopefully catch it the next time. So that's why I haven't gone back since last year, because I
yeah,
felt like I
it's
needed to
understandable.
get more information, because I don't want to go through that again. That was the most god-awful experience. I mean, and
We appreciate that.
the most painful procedures. It's like I felt like it was barbaric. Like the technology had not moved forward. It was like gross.
Yeah,
And
I'm
super
thinking you're
painful.
either a sensitive or an empath. I think Ambient had said that, or Cynthia, one of the two had
What?
said that. But yeah, I mean, we've actually had, not to kind of sidetrack off the jar, we've had experiences with that within our own investigations. Actually, a couple of our members, Marcy is actually one of our members, and she wasn't even on site, and she had horrific experiences
Oh, I
after
remember that. Yeah.
just going past the property that we were checking out. Sue, has had situations after we've gone past we've been on a property. There's some fickle things that go on at locations, whether you're
Mm-hmm.
detecting or whether you're doing, what we do, as far as the paranormal side of apps. That's it kind of goes back to that whole, there's ties between the relic seeking aspect of it, the treasure hunting aspect of it, and the paranormal investigation. There are ties.
Right.
But as far as the jar, I mean, if you've reburied it and everything kind of has settled down or stopped, that's
Mm-hmm.
that's some good stuff right there.
Right.
I wouldn't be afraid to go back to the site, because, like Sue
Right.
said, and I agree, you've got to bring some closure to what you've started to unearth.
Right.
Yeah, I would.
Whether it's finishing up the pottery you found, finish piecing it together, or whether it's just trying to finish finalizing, categorizing, and documenting what you found in that cellar hole, that dump site. That's where you need
Right.
to. That's where
It,
you need to go with
But
that.
yeah,
that was just a small portion. I mean, that dump goes for 30 feet
so
in
that's,
every
Yeah.
direction.
part of it is closure in your own
Mm-hmm.
conscience.
Yep.
Right.
Part of it is facing whatever it was that you had to bury, and closing that door and opening another one,
Right.
hopefully a
Yeah.
better one. But
Right.
if you don't go back, it'll always be there.
Right.
It's going to
Back
stick
in your
with you.
mind.
Right.
Yeah. One might even say it haunts you. Even your dreams. See what I did there?
Yeah.
So yeah. Like Sue will tell you, Sue and I have both gone back to locations we've investigated 6, 7, 8, 9 times,
Mhm.
just to try and get that closure, so it's not
Yeah.
bugging the hell out of us for months on end about
Right.
something.
Why didn't I look over here? Why didn't I do that? It's
Exactly.
over
At the woulda,
there.
shoulda, coulda's going on all the time.
Yeah. Right.
That's why when we do an investigation, we actually do a debrief afterwards, just to be like, okay, what did we do? What did we not do? What can we do better? If we need to revisit, what can we do better there?
Right. Yep. So,
So
so
Mama's gone detecting. You asked what's the difference between a sensitive and empath. A sensitive feels, gets feelings of surroundings, and has that, one would say, the women's intuition or the sixth sense. Whereas an empath, literally you're feeling what the person you're connected to or in proximity of is feeling, sometimes even thinking. This is why, like myself personally, I will never ever go and investigate a cemetery, because I'll walk in there and literally it's deafening for me, because
they're all yelling.
I am so much of I have that empathic gift where I'm literally feeling all that pain and that whether it's suffering or not, or I'm hearing crap going on.
Now I
No,
have
it's not
one
paranoid
cemetery.
schizophrenia, but there's some people that'll say, yeah, I can hear it, I can see it, I can smell it, I can feel it, and sometimes that's the empathic part of you kind of poking its little head out there.
Right. We have a cemetery in the next town over from me. We know it's a cemetery.
Mm-hmm.
There's no more stones left. It was all nobody. The stones were gone before I was a little girl. Even nobody knows for sure who's buried there, but they mow it every week. They mow it, but there's no stones there. It's weird.
Yeah, and that's the problem with, like, even up where I am. She will tell you she did a little extracurricular activity on Saturday and took a tool up to my area just to kind of poke around a place we're going to be investigating soon. There's a lot of family plots that aren't marked anymore, or were marked, that are just nothing anymore. But
that's what they did. It's all farmland where he is.
Right.
Yeah.
And they would have, they would bury their loved ones on the property.
Oh, I know.
Rather than in the cemetery.
I know a farm that's got a little bitty 20 by 15 or 15, well, probably 20 by 20 foot cemetery.
Mm-hmm.
There's only four markers in there.
Yep.
Yeah.
And now Nancy says, Ambient Girl Dig says, does anyone use Palo Santo sticks? What's that?
That's a really good question.
That's actually another. It's more common than the sage.
Okay.
And right now they're having an issue with if you're not growing it yourself, there's a shortage of sage because everybody's using it.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is one of the things that it's another go-to doing the same thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, let me scroll down.
So, Country Digger, smudging is a term that's used for burning sage over an area. You'll find that those with Native American roots backgrounds, that's their go-to term, is smudging.
Mm-hmm.
Also, Wiccans will use the term smudging. Holistic healing, it's the definite, it's the term of to use as smudging. It's just basically it's cleansing the area, getting the bad vibes out.
Right.
It's
right.
It's just cleansing yourself. You'll see. I mean, if you go use YouTube or the Google and you Google smudging or smudging ceremonies, you'll see there's different ways and types of doing it. Most people will use a sage stick and some sort of feather, a ritual type feather or ceremonial type feather to sage. There's when somebody is practicing therapeutic touch, sage is used, but you'll also see it used in conjunction of just their hands starting from the top and working their way down and out, and they're not touching you per se, but they're close enough that it's working your chakras and your auras and just getting that bad nasty out.
Right.
That's what's considered therapeutic touch.
Right.
It's part of holistic healing, the therapeutic touch part. But smudging is a term for burning sage and cleansing the area of negativity and offering that blessing, that gift,
right,
to whatever's around.
I see Ambient Girl mentioned there's different sages. There's different.
Yes.
As I like to say,
does it matter what kind of sage I grow?
I personally like to use the purple sage.
Purple sage. Okay.
Yeah.
That's Russian sage, isn't it? Russian sage? I believe that's purple.
Maybe. I don't know that for sure.
Okay.
It's similar. I mean, depending on the sage of choice is almost kind of similar to your whatever talisman or pendulum you use. It basically it's whatever you're drawn to or you're called to, or calls to you, so to speak. I know people that specifically, like, religiously will only touch white and use white sage when they're smudging. I had a friend who only preferred, like Sue said, the purple sage when they were smudging, and she is like 100% Native American, and that's all she would use was the purple sage.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I use.
So,
Okay.
you know, it's up to the particular person. You know, there's members on our team who practice Wicca, and they have their own personal preferences of what they use for sage or what's in their herb garden or their witch's garden, so to speak, in regards to their spices. We'll go with that.
Right. Well, I thought
you know.
I would order a cross to wear, and I'll just take it to my minister and ask him to bless it. And
Yes.
I'm going to explain to him that I do a lot of rural archaeology, and I've had some bad experiences, and I just need a cross to be blessed.
You might ask your minister if he has one.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Sometimes, I know the church where I grew up, they actually used to keep a supply of either St. Michael's or St. Christopher medals or crucifixes that were already pre-blessed, so to speak, and they would give them out at certain times of years to say the children, or you know, it was, you know, there was always the blessing of the children mass or something like that, and they would always get a supply. They'd, you know, do the holy water deal, and then they'd bless them, and then they would pass them out.
Right.
And that was at least for the Catholic faith. I was brought up Presbyterian. That wasn't exactly what we did. Yeah. So us Protestants and Methodists, we, you know, it's a little different, but the same concept. It's you know, have your pastor, you know, just, you know, say a prayer piece over it, or that kind of deal.
Right.
You know, my back history, I was brought up Presbyterian. I actually was ordained as a Presbyterian elder for several years before I kind of left the church and left the faith a little bit. But put some holy water in your spray bottle.
I have some
good
holy
in theory.
water. Preacher Digger sent me holy water.
I was going to say,
that works.
There's a store that Sue and I frequent a lot for our paranormal gear. It's called theghosthunterstore.com, which is we know the guy that runs it, Dave Giuliano, and he actually sells. He's a very stand-up guy, and he actually sells those blessing kits and the saging kits and the Saint Christopher and Saint Michael's medallions and stuff like that. And they are, you know, they're guaranteed as, you know, it's been blessed and taken care of prior to shipment, so to speak. I do tend to rely on him for that type of gear, and he does sell, you know, holy water on a rope kind of deal, you know, but it's not a gimmick. He, you know, the stuff that he distributes is it's very quality and not very he's not out for profit on that at all when it comes to that stuff.
Yeah, because I have a plan. I'm going to have treasure hunting videos on Friday. I'll have maybe 1 to 2 live streams on Tuesday a month. But then the other Tuesdays, I will be doing where there's a lot of cellar holes on state land, but we're not allowed to dig on state land. But I can still explore them.
It's an issue.
Yeah.
You know.
And actually, Deej, you and I had that conversation on the phone a while back about, you know, how similar our state land laws are when it comes to detecting and digging on state land. And where Sue lives, it's tripled with the amount of laws and regulations, because we live in, I used to live there, but we live in what's called the Adirondack Park, which is extremely more protected than even state land is.
I was going to say, you have your state laws, and then within the Adirondack Park, you have
your own laws,
tighter laws. That we joke that they have their spies watching all over the place.
You can't breathe near a squirrel without getting, you know, a ticket somewhere along the way. So, you know, it's even as far as like you could see jail time for stripping birch bark off a tree. That's how protected the land is down there.
Wow.
That's actually, I believe it's like 6 months jail time for stripping bark off a birch tree.
Well, it's like when I have some cellar holes I like to visit just whenever I'm out, want to just get out in nature. But before I go, all my metal detecting gear is removed out of the car.
Yep.
because you can't even drive on the property with the gear, or you could lose your car, you could lose everything.
Yeah, and that's actually the same in the Adirondack Park. You know, the rangers don't exactly enforce it as hard as they could, but if you're doing something really stupid, yeah, they're going to start playing the why are you got metal detectors on state land game,
Right,
you know.
exactly.
So as long as you're not, you know, really torquing them,
Right.
you could
I
probably get away
know
with
of
having
a
the gear in the
couple.
car, but I wouldn't take the risk.
I know of a couple that had to cross state land to get to their permission,
Yep.
and they nailed them for that. And I mean, it cost them dearly. They almost lost everything.
Yeah.
I believe it.
Yeah, that's what it is.
Hi, Uncle Al.
It's pretty stringent up here when it comes to the rules and regulations, and actually New York State's metal detecting law isn't even sitting in a category where it would be easily found. It's actually in the Department of Education uh, um, law. It's not actually a treasure hunting law per se. It's in the Department of Ed somewhere. Laws and regs and statutes in regards to historical artifacts and property, you know, that kind of deal.
Right.
It's like sub-article for something or other, you know.
Yeah.
It's buried in there. You know, are the law enforcement officers currently going to know that particular statute? Probably not. But if you're really torquing them with something else that you're doing, they're going to look for it.
Right.
Guaranteed.
Right.
You know, so it's just better to play it safe. That's why we have on our Facebook page for Relic Seekers that, you know, we don't do anything without an actual signed permission from the property owner. Period.
Right.
And a waiver of liability signed on top of it.
Yeah.
That way,
Whether
if
it's
the
the relic
rangers,
seeking or the investigating.
yeah,
Either way.
for Relic Seekers or for Paranormal. That way, if law enforcement decides to give us a hard time, we're hey, we got it. You know, here's the piece of paper that says the property owner says no, or yes,
Right.
or you know, something in between. So it's not.
Right.
So we're covered for that
Right.
kind of deal.
Papa Ruth, what's in the dirt? He says, Diggin with Deej, in all faiths, if you would like a blessed cross, I will send you one.
There you go.
Nice.
I said, thank you very
Bonus.
much, Bill. I appreciate that. Yes, I would like one.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
Because I mean, I've got a video coming up after I get done with the series on the new detector, the Technetics Delta 4000. I've got a couple more videos I've got to make on that. And then I'll get back to my normal metal detecting with my T2 and the Simplex and all that.
Yep.
But I had a permission, an owner of a permission tell me that if I went back in the woods, that I would find a strange foundation. So I did a video on it, just exploring this foundation, and I still haven't, nobody knows what it was. It's not on any of the early maps. Nobody knows what it used to be. Nobody has a clue.
So let me ask you this. Is there any rail beds in the area?
There is a rail bed between it and the nearest road.
Gotcha. So I ask you this because I actually had a similar
Because
situation.
it's all different level foundations. Like it's like a maze.
I had a similar situation a few years ago when I was doing a geocache. It's not on any topographical map going back as far as I can find on record, and Sue knows exactly where I'm talking about. But there's an old foundation to an old, basically it's a flag stop station, whistle stop station on the old New York Central line that doesn't have, there's no black box anywhere on any topographical map, any aerial map. And it was literally all that's left is a foundation. It was raised years and years and years and years and years ago. And the only reason I that's why I asked you about that is because I've noticed, and even with the railroad that Sue and I used to work on, a lot of the stations don't show on the topo map.
On the map.
Just the rail bed does.
Right.
That's included in the railroad property, so it's not. They don't have to mark it on the topo maps.
Right.
So that it could potentially be a rail station. Never know. The multi-level foundations would kind of sort of tell me it kind of almost resembles our station where we used to work, Sue, where we had multi-levels.
Part of it is stone wall.
Yeah.
That is just old stone wall. Part of it is repaired stone wall.
Okay.
Yep.
Where it's been repaired with old concrete, you know, the really gravelly old stuff.
Yep.
And some of it is concrete, old concrete.
And we had a station that was built in 1929. Same situation. They used foundation off the old building, added onto it with new foundation. In the 60s, it was renovated again, and they built onto the foundation with that multi-level structure.
You could easily have a building if the rail bed is going near that at one level, and behind it, if it's lower, if they're bringing stuff in from the train and taking it out the other side, you're going to have a multi-layer.
Yeah, you're going to have your grade level and your rail bed level. You know, it's a possibility. Not saying it is, but
is where this is located. There's a highway along it, and if you drive down the highway, because I wanted to look at the lay of the land, even though I can get to it from the owner's house, but I want to drive by it, and my son's property is maybe a mile before that on the same side of the road. He's got the old rail bed. It's like when you open his gate and drive in, you got this giant bank where the rail bed used to be. And his place is on the other side of it. But when
it could have been a spur at one point too.
When you get to this property, though, because it's like in a corner of two roads in the woods, the rail bed disappears and then it starts up again farther down the road. So all I can figure is when they made that highway,
they took out the rail bed.
They took out some of the rail bed.
If you can find some maps from, say, 1860-ish, you might find that that building, a building there, or you may not.
It's not on the 1872 map.
See if you can go back a little further.
Welcome, Krusty Clad. Welcome, Frankie.
But then again, as long as you see the rail bed going across there in that general vicinity where you have that building, I have to agree with Damon. I think it's an outer building.
Okay. It was probably an outbuilding for the railroad at some point or another.
Right.
And railroads used to own 100, 200, 300 feet of right away from the center of the rail in either direction.
Not far from where I live, there's a spur that goes off what used to be a major railway line, and it went through the farmer. And the farmer would put his milk kettles on there, and then other farmers would come and meet there. We had the tree farm not far from that, and he would bring his trees in, and so they would all gather at this one farm that had a spur.
Wow.
At the time, there was no road to it. Now there's a road that goes right in front of it.
Right.
And then they would back up, go back to the main line, and ship it out.
Oh, wow.
So it's possible that could be what it is.
Right. You'll have to take a look at it, because what I'm going to do once I release that video, I'm going to also put in my poll section on my community page, what kind of foundation, what do you think it's a foundation to?
Yeah.
So that everybody can chime in on that too. But when I explore these, I don't care what I find. I don't take anything with me because, number one, it's usually on state land and that's illegal.
Yeah.
I don't think you can take anything that's worth $50 or more or something like that.
Yep.
And I don't want to bring something home with me because I'm not familiar with these sites.
And it's not like you have a pocket assessor that can tell you how much things are.
Yeah.
New York State's law says that anything over a $5 value has to be turned back into the New York State Police. I don't know what the value of something is when I pull it out of the ground. So, unless it's a private permission, it's going back in the dirt.
But it was an interesting site. The fact that I couldn't figure out what kind of foundation it was kind of gave it that eeriness to me.
Yeah.
There were a lot of ACL bottles, collectible bottles, but I did not take any of them, which I could have, but I didn't. I just, something didn't feel quite right there.
And you listen to the little voices in your head.
Yeah. Yep.
Yep.
So
and
all I took was pictures and video. That was it.
There's a village it's kind of between where Damon and I live.
Mm-hmm.
There was a lot of sickness in the town. It wasn't a very big town.
Yep.
But speaking of being raised, they burned the whole town down because there was a few people that survived. They burned the town down, and they went and lived someplace else.
Yeah.
Well, nobody can find the foundations.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
They wanted to make sure nobody would come back.
Yeah. Aerial views doesn't even you can't even find it in aerial views because the canopy is so thick. However, all the underlying growth, nothing grows there at all. Period.
Oh, that's
on the underlying growth. Exactly. And that's kind of been on our bucket list for a while now.
I'd like to walk the property, but I definitely wouldn't take it.
I wouldn't do it alone. I wouldn't do it alone. Now, years ago, Tom and I were looking for property up in the Mayo area. And we walked onto this piece of property, beautiful piece of property, wooded. The front was open, but the back was wooded. We walked in the woods, and I immediately got a shiver down my spine. And I looked at Tom and I'm going, there's no wildlife sounds. There's no birds. I said, nope. This is not the property.
Big red
flag. Turned around and walked back.
Time to go.
And he's
apologize.
Going, silly now, and I'm going, if there's no wildlife here, it's not safe for people.
Yep.
Simple as that. And then we find out that they discovered, like 5 or 10 years after we looked at that site, that there was an illegal toxic dump site there.
Oh, yeah, that'll do it.
Oh.
So, use your intuition, folks. If you find a cellar hole or a foundation in the woods, you get a bad feeling.
Yeah, don't push your luck around.
It's not worth it.
No.
In the long run, it's definitely not worth it.
Hi, Tommy.
Yeah, that goes back to the whole having respect for where you're acting and what you're digging.
Right.
That goes back to our first episode where we discussed that it all ties back to being respectful of what was originally there.
Yep.
At that time.
Yep. That's my alarm. Come on, turn off. Now I want to talk to everybody in the chat with you guys, with you, Sue and Damon.
Yep.
Sue and Damon and I were talking about doing some live streams throughout the year where we invite people in from the chat to tell us their experiences when they've had a creepy or a weird experience while out detecting. Would you guys be interested in something like that?
I'd be more than glad to be a part of that as well.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Yeah.
With you guys, that was the whole point.
Yeah. Granted, it's not building more content in our channel, but yeah, it definitely gives us a kind of that stepping stone to start building our channel
Nancy
where we're actually.
Yes. Team Clambake says cool.
Yeah. And that's what we're looking for is we want to actually have more of these from our channel. We like to do some more panel discussions. Monthly.
I know that Mark for one, and I haven't talked to Brandon yet from Alabama Dirt Digger, and I haven't talked to Stan about it either. I know Stan has had experience.
Mm-hmm.
I know the three of them have had experiences. So,
yeah.
But welcome, Cheryl and Randy. Thank you for coming. So, thank you two very much for coming and chatting with me on this. I appreciate your advice and your help with this.
Definitely. And if anybody is out there that, that's still, watching, and if you're having experiences like this or whatever, I know, one of the mods was putting our, the Paranormal Facebook page up. if they can put the link to the Relic Seekers page up too. Either of those, if you reach out to us via the email address or the message us button on those, it goes straight to my phone and Sue's phone. One of us will we get back to you pretty quickly. And we can try and help you as much as we can. Granted, we're not, we may not be in the same state or the same location where we can come out and run an investigation, but we can give you some insight on what you might want to do. We have a pretty good resource tree of people that we're making contacts with that okay, so yeah, you're here, it's not really in our area, but there's team A, B, and C that might be able to help you.
Right.
Try talking to them.
Right.
But in the interim, here's what we suggest you might want to think about doing. And that's kind of where we're at, what we can do for you.
Right.
As far as, I've got no problem. Sue and I were talking about this a lot because we're not quite to the point where we're doing lives yet, but we're going to start probably doing some podcasts, so to speak, some canned panel discussion with, maybe a guest or two here and there with a couple members from the team, and to start our content on our channel. And it's going to be kind of that same concept. So I've got no problem coming on with you, Sue, and Deej, and doing another, doing a panel discussion like that again.
Okay. Yeah.
And it, like we talked about, I know there was a member you were referring to that might want to join in on the live stream,
right,
to discuss their experiences. I got no problem with that either. It's kind of, we're here to help, whether or not it's in our kind of our, not like we really have any set defined lines of where our investigation areas are,
right,
but we do travel a good extent, but we're not going to go across the country when there's 20, 30 teams in that area that could handle it for us.
Exactly.
But yeah, we've got no problem coming on and doing some more of these lives and helping out where we can and giving some insight on what we think it might be. That's kind of where we're stretching our resources, expanding our resources to that extent as well. It's the same as working with Adventures with Purpose. We'll work with you guys. We that's what we're here to do, is to help out the community where we can and when we can.
Right.
So
okay. Well, I'll let you two go, and thank you very much for joining me tonight. I really appreciate it. I know everybody in the chat really enjoyed it, and I can't wait till we do another live stream.
Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. We'll be around.
Okay.
For sure. We're starting to get into our, finally, the ground thawed out season, so we're gonna hopefully be out running our detectors here soon too, and hopefully maybe have some content to put up on the channel, even if it's just some spliced together video of what we've hit so far and stuff like that.
Right.
We got.
I wouldn't wait until you have everything just the way you want it, because it doesn't matter. Even if you do think you have everything just the way you want it, you're still going to evolve.
Yep.
Everybody starts as a beginner and evolves. So
yeah, that's what we're finding out, is we started Relic Seekers for one purpose, and we're literally the shift is noticeable. We're literally going. We're kind of on that same kind of path as Adventures with Purpose, actually, not to compare too much, but they started out with one purpose for environmental cleanup, and they're now working cold cases.
They're working cold cases.
We're starting to get that same type of, hey, by the way, you guys are doing this, but can you help us with this? And it's leading us in that same path. So we totally understand and get the concept. So, but yeah, we're gonna start trying to get some content up. We've got some things going. We've got a fundraiser coming up in October, but it takes time to get that one going. So we're actually going to be busy coming up soon on the next month or so, getting that going.
I was going to say, we got another fundraiser coming up midsummer,
July. Beginning in July. which will be it's a local community event, but it's kind of our kickoff pre-sale for our. We do a big haunted house every year, and that's kind of we select a benefactor. They get 60% of the profit. We get the 40%, and
Right.
It helps go to pay for travel expenses and equipment and stuff like that. And
Right.
actually, it goes back into the haunted house as well for more props, so we can
Right.
we can benefit somebody else the next year.
Right.
So yeah, if you guys, if you check us out on our Facebook page, I see Ambient just put up our paranormal link that actually will link you to our A.P.P.S Relic Seekers page as well, through the A.P.P.S Paranormal page. And definitely, give us a shout. We got no problem. It may take us a bit to get back to you, but don't lose faith. We all work our 9 to 5s. This isn't our paid gig,
Right.
so we
It'd be nice if it
have our.
was.
Oh
Right.
yeah. So and then
Okay.
yeah, definitely.
That sounds good. That
we look
sounds
forward
good.
to doing another one with you.
So I don't mean to cut you short, but I need to finish up so that the people in our chat can go on to Jersey History Hunters and have a little bit of a break in between the two streams.
Coffee run.
Okay.
Right.
Yep. Yep. So thank you so much, you two. And I
All
look
right.
forward to more adventures with you.
All right. Everybody stay safe.
Okay.
Definitely.
Thank
Take
you.
care, guys.
Night. Okay. So I hope everybody enjoyed this. I wanted to talk about it because I wanted to talk about it for over a year now. And we had been hoping that Jess would have been able to join us, but she had to work late. She's a member of their team that has some forensic investigation experience. So, but thank you everybody for coming and supporting us tonight. We really appreciate it. Be sure to come back after the stream and put in the comments, what you might want to see for live streams, or if you had an experience and you want to be involved in a live stream with us. The more the merrier. So thank you again, and we will see you soon.